Welcome to the Rainmaker Podcast, where we elevate marketing leaders inside and out. I'm your host, Veronica Rami, master marketer, executive leader, and mentor to ambitious marketing leaders wanting to advance their careers. Each episode is filled with genuine, unscripted conversations with some of the world's top marketing experts, accomplished leaders, and industry trailblazers representing brands, both large and small. Our goal with this podcast and everything we do is to help you master your role, nurture your team, prioritize your well-being, and evolve into an industry-leading Rainmaker. This is the Rainmaker Podcast. In this episode, get ready to meet a true legend and total badass CMO. Let's just put it this way. The next time you do a Zoom call with her, you'll see the words F average, be legendary decaled on her wall. With over 20 years experience in the game, SOCi's Chief Marketing Officer, Monica Ho, is no stranger to the startup world. One of SOCi's earliest employees on the scene, she has navigated the company from its early funded startup days to now achieving their 6th year in a row being listed in the Inc. 5000 with 71% revenue growth year over year in spite of the economy. We get into everything, being the first CMO on the scene with zero predecessor before her dynamic relationship with her CEO, how she personally balances the demands of her week between strategy, team management, continual education, and how she stayed sharp 2 decades into the marketing game. Let's make it rain on today's episode with Monica Ho. Monica, welcome to the Rainmaker Podcast.
Thank you for having me, Veronica, and what a wonderful intro.
Oh, well, yeah. Well, how about this? Because I'm going to have you more formally introduce yourself to the community. They'll just be like, yep, she's a badass. Veronica said so. But for you, tell them all the cool things that you have done to get to this position in your career.
Yeah, great. So I have a little bit over 20 years experience in digital marketing. Started my career at an agency and worked very closely with clients on the data side doing media planning, evolved into actually a sales role, and then later on became a marketer again and actually started the digital marketing practice of that agency. Stayed with that agency over 10 years and had an opportunity to dive into mobile marketing as a smartphone was coming onto the scene. So picked up and moved the family to New York and worked for a mobile data company, which was awesome. It really combined, as you mentioned, Veronica, corporate or national as well as local marketing and how that data was being used on smart devices. And it was being used for a lot of really cool things like, site selection for certain retailers. You could use that data for audience development as well as ad targeting. Spent 7 years building that company, scaling it. We went international, scaled to over 100 million plus, and then decided it was time for a change. So my family had been living in New York, wanted to get to Austin. So made a personal move with the family and got introduced to SOCi. And SOCi was the perfect blend of all of my background, digital, a lot of national, but localized marketing as well, as you had mentioned, in terms of what we do. So I've been at SOCi now for a little bit over 5 years. We're also scaling. And again, I love this role because it gives me an opportunity to work with national brand marketers and the challenges they have, as well as the local agents, franchisees, and the challenges they're facing in localizing their brand, reaching their audiences, et cetera.
Yeah, you're in a really interesting position because not only are you the head rainmaker, so to speak, for SOCi, you're the CMO. You oversee the marketing team for the organization that you're a part of and employed by. But then by the nature of the offer and the product that is SOCi, you also then work with the marketing teams and speak to the marketers on your clients, essentially your customer side too, because they're the ones that are utilizing this software to be better. So it's really fun. In so many ways, you're speaking to your own kind.
That's right.
Okay, I want to talk to you about your marketing background because I think we can look at your LinkedIn and say, yes, wow, insanely experienced, biggest arena types. I mean, you compete in the Coliseum, not the cockfight in the backyard type of marketing game. But who helped you coming up become what you are today? Like, did you have mentors? Did you invest in your self-development? Like, wise? Did you buy courses? Did you screw that? Formal institution route? I'm just curious how you poured into your own human capital to stay competitive in these really insane, roles.
Yeah, that's a great question. I think early on in my career, and even as far as when I was at the mobile company in New York, a lot of it was just honestly curiosity and grit. What do I mean by that? I took on more responsibility if I could learn something. And things that scared me or that were new motivated me because I feel like if you're in a position that you're comfortable in, you feel really comfortable, you're probably not learning. And I found that I learned by pushing myself to be on the edge of that uncomfortable place where it's like, oh, I really like this. I know what I'm doing here, but this is really interesting. I really need to learn more. And so I was always raising my hand, always willing to take a different role, whether it was lateral, or in a different department if it allowed me to learn something. So that's why in my first 10 years at the agency, I held a ton of different roles. And I think that just helped me become a little bit more well rounded. So as a marketer, I've sat in the sales seat. I understand, what those sellers are up against when they're, front and center in front of a client. I've also been on the customer service side, right? So I think, you've got to play a few different roles and like I said before, push yourself. When I got to a more senior level, as I went to the mobile data company, I started to get very involved, not only in leading the company, presenting, doing all those things, but I started to have a pretty regular presence in board meetings. And I was like a fish out of water. And I didn't really take any formal mentors up until that point. I, aligned myself with people that I admired and would reach out to them. I tried to build a network, but I think it was those board meetings when one of our board members actually took me under their wing, two of them, in fact. And they were two gentlemen, John Costello and Mike Linton. They're both very big marketers in the space. John was global CMO of Dunkin'. He had been at Home Depot. Mike Linton had basically built the Farmers Insurance brand. Prior to that, he'd been at Best Buy. So he did a bunch at Procter & Gamble, et cetera. Anyway, I was so fortunate because these two gentlemen were like, listen, you've got a seat at the table. And one of my big things was I was trying to be respectful. So I wouldn't say anything. And then, people would start talking, sharing their opinions, and I would be quiet and I'd wait for an entry. And an entry never came. And so the first time I was pulled out was like, hey, you got a seat at the table. You better use your voice. And so I had to figure out how to get in there and get my opinions and my voice heard. And then from there, it just became a regular coaching session with these two. And they were a little bit different. Like one would coach me on getting out of my head and how to present my ideas. The other one was a great sounding board for different things I wanted to do or bring up. So I ended up really benefiting from formal mentoring, even though it wasn't traditional in the sense that, I found they kind of asked me. And to this day, I still reach out to them for advice. Now I've kind of evolved. I don't have that formal mentor any longer. I reach out to John and Mike when needed, but I've found virtual networks amazing. I belong to several of them with the private Slack groups, and then we've got weekly calls. That's also amazing because marketers, we don't know everything. We all have varied experiences. And by connecting with a larger group of marketers that have different experiences, we're all learning faster, pitfalls, things that have worked. And it's just been amazing. So I would definitely recommend the virtual communities to anyone looking to build a network.
Oh, absolutely. Okay, so many things came up for me. You can probably tell that I'm like scribbling away. Number one, I know corporate marketing gets a really bad rap and everybody wants to dog on the corporate marketing villainization, persona character type, arch nemesis. Not to say that I didn't have negative corporate experiences personally. I did. I have the whole thing, but I too had incredible mentors, both male and female. In fact, I had better male mentors in my corporate run before leaving. And still to this day, I'll text, Chase, Josh, John, like there's just it's the names, I text the the friends and reach out if there's something in particular that I just need counsel on or a different perspective on. And it meant a lot to me. And they too, I think this is why, and I don't know if it's because I'm a female who tends to operate more in her masculine to perform the way that I do, which I think is very common for women like us. But communicating with my male colleagues has always come very easily to me because I love how straight to the point they are. And so the fact that they challenged you and said, look, you're here, so you better show up and be here as opposed to just being here. As soon as you said that, I'm like, oh, I would have like chest out, let's go, arms back. All right. Because I love to be challenged. You know, I like the coaches at Orange Theory that yell at me. Those are my favorite ones. So I loved that they challenged you to be bigger. But more importantly than just challenging you, they also then provided you help to do so because they probably saw more potential that maybe you even saw possible in yourself. So then here's my question, because now you're a marketing leader amongst other up and coming young professionals and marketing personnel on your own teams. How do you provide that for those that are now in your care? Because you're the senior, you're the mentor.
Yeah. I mean, I've benefited in my career by those who invested in me. And I believe very strongly in that. And it's really part of what I try to bring to my teams and what I take a lot of pride in my leadership and management style is, you know, I believe in a situational leadership mentality, meaning you get to really know people, you know, what makes them tick, what are their motivations. And it's very personal how you manage somebody and how you get them to a better place, right? Some are motivated by, you know, that external praise. And, you know, some don't like that. That's demotivating. They don't like to be called out like that, but then they're very motivated by money. It just really depends on the person. And so I really try to get to know my teams. And then, you know, I give them as much time that they as they need. I always schedule time at minimum an hour every week for my team members. And then I tell them, like, look, if you need something, Slack me, call me. You have my cell phone. You want to go out for a drink. You know, I'm always willing to have a conversation. I find myself to be a very upfront person too with feedback. And, you know, I tell my teams all the time, if we're going through a review and you hear something from me that surprises you, that means I wasn't a very effective leader, right?
Amen. I say that all the time.
Right.
Yep.
It should be a review. Hey, we've been talking weekly. We talk all the time. You've made great improvements here or that. It really bothers me when people are surprised by things that I say because I take time and thought into coaching people and giving them feedback. I also believe pretty big in reverse mentoring, Veronica, which means, you know, I've kind of aligned myself with other groups where I have younger marketers that I reach out to and align with. Although they might not be at an executive level, I find they push me in a different way. There's so many advancements in technology. And it's just so interesting how the younger generation are using the different channels, you know, the way that they look at things. And so I really love that as well, aligning yourself with people that are younger than you are, because they have things to teach you as well. And I find that really intriguing.
I have to ask the question, like if I were to look at your calendar for the week, if you, and this is like, you know, just rough ballpark it here and no exact science required, but like how much time do you feel that you're operating in the different quadrants of your role? Like how much time are you spending on like strategy and like deep thinking for the future, for the direction of your department, the direction of, you know, obviously your impact on the totality of the organization, being in charge of marketing? Hello, that's a lot, right? So like how much time are you spending on the strategic vision versus people management versus individual? I mean, like if you had to break down a typical week in your role, what would that look like?
So it's not ideal, my typical week right now.
Okay.
Where SOCi is, we are scaling. And so we're at a point where
Yes.
I need to be spending way more time, a lot more of my time on strategy, and I'm not. I'm spending a lot of my time scaling up some more junior managers. And you've got to make the decision, you know, when you're scaling an organization, how much time do you spend on pulling people up? And can they learn quickly? So there's a certain amount of time you can spend doing that. And if people are taking advantage of the opportunity, they're learning quick, great. But sometimes
Mm-hmm.
people can't rise to the occasion, right? There are
Mm-hmm.
people that I
Mm-hmm.
found in my time being in a leadership role that are willing but not able. Able but not willing. I mean, to get to the next level, you have to be willing and able. And sometimes
Yes.
people don't know, and they really want to go to the next level, but they're not able to. Maybe they don't have the right experience, or the motivations aren't there, whatever. So right now I'm spending a lot of time coaching, managing some of
Mm-hmm.
these more junior or greener leaders to get to a different place. I am starting to look at higher level leaders coming into the organization. So I've got a lot of directors in place bringing in VPs. Why that's important is because if I can get somebody that's an athlete that can drop in and just they know the role, they can do the role, then I can be out doing more strategy. So I'm in
Yes.
between right now. I'm not at the point where I've got to just bring in all new VPs. I love to bring people up and give them the opportunity, but there's a time frame that I need to make a decision.
Yeah. Well, and that's the thing too, because we see that with our rainmakers in the online industry. It's the same thing. It's like, how do I find space for, and this is, I think this is the life cycle of a marketer. How do I find space for learning, doing, delegating, leading, strategizing? Like there's so many, and it's different parts of the brain, right? Like that deep work where you're like, man, I need a nap because it was like 2 hours of like forecasting for the future. Like or you're looking at the spreadsheet, you're like, I just need coffee, right? I need something to pick me up because man, one can only look at spreadsheet for so long. And so that's a thing that we also see on our side, even though we're not, the online space doesn't see a lot of $100 million businesses. I'll be very honest with you. That's few and far between. Most of the clients that I work with are scaling from 7 figures to 8 figures, like
Mm-hmm.
very different arena size and different budget sizes. But it's that there's not enough time to be in all of these seats and all of these hats, and they're all required to be successful.
Mm-hmm.
And it's very overwhelming. Which then brings me to my next point that I wanted to talk to you, because we talked about this a little bit when we first got on like our initial date call to like, hey, do you want to get on my podcast? On my side, our rainmakers in the online industry turn over on average without any type of aid or support when left to their own. They turn over on average every 8 to 9 months, which is insane. But then you told me a stat that also blew my socks away. So in your world, in that corporate, in the big leagues, corporate marketing arena types, what is the average tenure of CMOs, and what was it before and what is it today?
It's changing so much. I mean, the average
Yeah.
tenure is, I think the last one we just did this was on one of my virtual communities. We just did a survey, and I think it was now like 2 to 3 years average CMO
Hmm.
tenure, and then they turn over. There are some industries where the average is in the 4-year range, but they're not long tenures, right? If you look at
Hmm.
LinkedIn and you look at some of these CMO roles, they're short stints.
Yep.
And it really depends on the company. I guess in my space where you're a technology company and you're scaling, I think what tends to happen, there's two things that happen. One, you have a marketer that got into a seat that didn't appeal to their strengths. So as you
Hmm.
you know, Veronica, whether you are, managing a small business or a large enterprise, the marketing role can mean a lot of different things because
Yep.
such a broad field. And so
Yep.
when you get into a seat as a marketing head or leading marketing, you really need to understand, like, what is this role? And how is this role going to be successful? Like, ask those questions. How am I going to be measured? What does success look like in the first year? So you can really understand, like, is this more of a go-to-market role? Is this branding and messaging? Is this demand gen, like really heavy demand gen? And marketers, I mean, again, we try to be everything. The reality is we're not. We have strengths and we
Right.
have opportunities. And so aligning yourself with your strengths is going to allow you to have longer tenure, right? Because,
Yep.
you're going to come in, you're going to hit the ground running, you're going to make an impact right away. So I think there was a great Harvard Business Review article. I can't remember the name of it, but it came out 2 years ago, and it was about how marketers need to break down the interview and really find out what kind of marketing role the opportunity
Mm.
is. So number one, like, really understand what the role is, what does it entail? But I think number two, why tenures are getting
Shorter.
shorter is the role is changing so fast.
The speed. Yep.
Fast. The speed is just insane. And so as a marketer, you've got to really push yourself to, stay on the leading edge of the field, jump in. Right now, all the rage is AI, generative AI. And like no one has more time in their day. Make time, play around with it, understand, right? Talk to people. How are they, leveraging it? You got to stay curious, and you've got to push yourself. The other thing is, if you don't, what I've found in especially a fast moving company that's growing really fast, that the company will outgrow you. And what's really interesting, I tell my, some of my team this all the time. I've been CMO for SOCi for over 5 years. I feel like I've had 10 different roles in that time frame, because in every stage of our company, you need a little bit of a different marketer. And, you just have to be aware of that and understand, you've got to do things differently. You've got to shift your focus. Like you had mentioned, I need to start shifting my focus to a lot more strategy. And I'm finding I'm spending it a lot more of my time managing. And I need to figure out how to do that. Or, there will be repercussions if I don't move into a more strategic role quicker. So these are just things that, marketers need to be aware of. It impacts how long we sit in seat. If we're not aware of it, we're not ahead of it.
Well, but I think it's a testament to you and your personality, because this is something that we see it's really bad. This is like a chronic issue that we see on my side in the online space, which is like, there's a well-intended job description that goes to solicit this person. And then the job description that I was hired upon and that I interviewed for and that I agreed to and that my compensation is tied to 30 days, if not, I've seen it as quickly as like the first weekend. You're like, what the this isn't what I signed up for. But like very more common is like in the first 30, 60, 90 days, that initial beautifully well, designed, branded on the website job description is nothing close to what the role is.
Yep.
And it leaves a huge there's a lot of resentment that's happening, where marketers are, at least in my space, are starting to self-elect out. Like, this is an impossible role. I have the entire weight of the company's success, it feels like, on my shoulders. I don't have a budget. There's no space for learning and development. I don't even have a proper team. I'm inheriting vendors or personnel that is like a cousin to a friend. What the like, and it's a hot mess, and you're expected to, have a 200% hockey stick growth year over year. Like, what is that? At least that's the conditions I feel like that my rainmakers have to perform in a lot of the cases, and their expectations are sometimes so unrealistic. But in my world, the rainmaker is replacing the CEO in the position. Like, there wasn't a former CMO. There wasn't even a former marketer, head of marketing. It was literally the personality, the personal brand, who did all of their own marketing with the aid of social media that has no barrier entry. They're doing their jam. They're selling their thing. They're wheeling and dealing based off personality. And now this person has to replace literally their boss.
Yeah.
So that's not what you're not replacing the CEO of the company, but is some of that parallel? Is some of that completely different? I'm just curious if there was any commonality between my world and your world.
Very common, especially in the stage of where I come in, because I join companies at startup and then, scaling them up. So for instance, at SOCi, I was the first, head of marketing. And at that point, this business was 50 employees. And so the founder CEO, he built this, like, it's his brand, it's his baby, and he's still involved today. And I work very closely with our founder CEO because this is his baby, and he has a very, very strong vision for the company, and I have to partner with him. And it's not, what's interesting about the marketing role in a company like this is that it's more of a partnership than, hey, I'm making all the decisions. It's very collaborative. So I have to partner a lot with my CEO, and we've got to make sure we're aligned. And there are definitely things that I'm going to die on the hill on, because I feel like I just know it's right. And even though if it's conflicting with his opinion, I'll still push it and, give him the background as to why I feel a certain way, and vice versa. I know there's things that he really cares strongly about, and, he's pushing me on, and I'll have to step back. So to me, I feel like we're almost two in a box in a lot of ways. I really need to make sure as the marketer of the company, I am fully aligned with the founder CEO vision. Where does he want to take this company? Am I messaging it right? Are we aligned? So I hope that answers a question, but I think there's a lot of similarities there.
I'm actually really surprised by how much the language that you literally just used is the language that we hear and see often as well, where our aspiring rainmakers are taking on the CMO capacity from their CEO, who's had to do all the chief positions. They've had to be the marketer, they've had to be fulfillment, they've had to be HR, they've had to be everything. And I find that marketing centric CEOs, revenue centric CEOs, like meaning the CEO wasn't like an engineer, like they're not like the Steve Wozniak, they're more on the Steve Jobs, CEO spectrum. They tend to get more possessive and they tend to get more protective over marketing. And so to relinquish it to another marketer is like so scary and so difficult. And it seems to me that you also had a CEO that was more on that kind of visionary spectrum of the Steve Jobs category. So how did you do it? Because and I don't know like a fief like in and out necessarily, but just on the outside, when I hear both of you speak, you are different. You communicate differently. He's a male, female. Like there's a lot of differences. Like, so how did you do it? How did you convey a level of reassurance and confidence to him that he could let go of something I'm sure he really, and still to this day, really cares about?
Sure. I think it's about being flexible and
Mm-hmm.
being really great at listening. And I could come in as a marketer and, tout my experience and say, this is how it's going to be. I don't think that kind of marketer would survive in a company like this. I mean, you have to come in and understand that you are, coming in with your experience, but to work in partnership with the founder CEO to get the brand and the business to the next level, to a better level from a marketing perspective. And so, as I mentioned, I'm really comfortable with being flexible in certain areas and listening to a different perspective, and almost compromising in some ways on certain things, to make sure that the things that are most important to my CEO are being addressed. But what I was trying to solve for was also getting taken care of. Sometimes that means, I just have to angle my approach a little bit differently or take a step back. At the end of the day, what's really interesting, Veronica, is I feel like the output is so much stronger having to go through that with my CEO than if I was just doing it alone. So I think
Yeah.
what I've been able to build over the course of my relationship with the CEO is respect on both sides, right? We talk things out, we explain ourselves, and then we compromise in some cases. In other cases, we just agree on the other person's idea or angle, and we just keep moving. And at the end of the day, there's no hard
Mm-hmm.
feelings. We're not doing brain
Mm-hmm.
surgery here. We're marketing
Mm.
the business, and it's really personal, and we both really are passionate about it, and it works.
Well, and I think what you said that's so wise is like a healthy dynamic when two human beings are equally passionate over the responsibility that is generating leads and desire and want for what your company has to offer. Like equal in passion, equal in ambition, which is exciting because like the proverbial like nobody will care about my business as much as I do, right? Is what plays through a lot of founders opinions. And same thing with parenting. Like nobody's gonna love my baby the way I love it, which is true. So, but when you meet somebody who can meet you with that same kind of drive and energy and fire in the belly, that's exciting. But I think what I loved what you said most is like the compromise element, because oftentimes, sadly, what I see sometimes with CEO and CMO or rainmaker duos is competition where it's like the better marketer, they're competing for who's the better marketer versus the compromising of like where two minds come together, a third is formed. And it's in the ping ponging tournament between the two of you that the best ideas, the most creative ideas, the most innovative ideas are coming together because you're each adding a layer. So like kind of to the tapestry that is the art of marketing. So I love that you said that because
Mm-hmm.
I think there's this reputation around corporate America. It's like, the doggy dog world and, everybody's cutthroat, but that's not always the case. In really healthy dynamics, there can still be found a lot of love, respect, and compromising. Hey, Rainmakers, true or false? Becoming a top marketing leader is all about climbing that corporate ladder. False. Such crap advice for modern marketers. The true key to unlocking your career potential in today's landscape, learning how to promote yourself versus waiting for someone else's validation. Introducing the new Rainmaker Roadmap, your free comprehensive guide to becoming a marketing powerhouse. Master your role, nurture your team, prioritize your well-being, and evolve into the marketing visionary you are meant to be. Grab your roadmap today by going to rainmakerroadmap.com or grab the link in the show notes. Now back to today's episode. Okay, so I'm going to switch gears a little bit because now I want to get all up in your business to the degree that you allow me to. I really want to understand how you care for yourself. And I'm not even necessarily talking about self-care. Like, you don't have to tell me about your nightly bubble baths, which is great. I'm not even know if that's true, but I want to know how you care for your craft. Like, to what degree, because this is something that I talk about with my husband a lot, and I know that it's common for like sales reps to invest in sales curriculum. They go to sales conferences, they have sales coaches. Sometimes the company will even bring a sales coach to the party, and sometimes the individual's paying it for, on their own dime outside of the company. But like, as a marketer, because it's so fast, there's so many things. What kind of investments, like if I looked into your credit card statement, like what kind of investments are you pouring into for your personal gain and the increase of your human capital?
I think I do this in a couple of ways. One is making time. And I do this early in the mornings before my meetings start, but to go in and start reading some of, important publications that I follow on what's happening in marketing. Is there some new launch? Did a competitor do something? Like we have to have our finger on the pulse at all times. And it's so easy to say, I don't have time for it. But it's so important, and it gives you, it just keeps you sharp, right? What's happening in the market? What has changed? What do I need to think about that? How do I need to think about that? So it's making that time investment in yourself. Just don't get so, caught up in everything that's going around in your business and not seeing anything happening outside of it. I think that could be horrible for you in your business, as well as externally. And then number two, I have invested in the past, going to events and, seminars and things like that. I still think they're good. I actually find my best education, or like where I'm learning a lot, from networks. So what happened during COVID is you had these new like digital CMO networks crop up. I'm part of a B2B CMO network that is fantastic. It's literally 4,000 different leaders in B2B marketing, director on up. The CMOs, the VPs are all very engaged. And every Friday, we literally learn something new, whether it's what's going on with product-led growth. It's a new buzzword in B2B marketing. Or there's a lot of turnover right now. What should you be thinking about as a CMO when you're negotiating your next, role? What should you be thinking about? How do stock options play into it? And all of these things that are always on top of our mind, but we're learning from each other. And then we're bringing in outside speakers that have a perspective. And again, making that investment every Friday for an hour is something I do. And it's important. You have to invest back in yourself, as you mentioned, Veronica.
Oh, yeah. I mean, and the thing, I laugh because it's like by the time a marketing book is published, it's already outdated.
Right.
And so, like, it's not like it's really not helpful sometimes to read just the fluffy marketing books, as great as they are, because I mean, again, it's just so fast, and especially in the industry that you're a part of, in that particular business vertical where you are a funded startup that is ridiculously aspirational and ambitious. Like, you're gunning for
Right.
some big goals, and you have to be on the cutting edge to stay relevant as a person, but also as a leader within an organization that's going to be held to some high standards. Okay, that's fantastic. So I'm in awe of what you are. I also have a lot of empathy for what it is to be a CMO, for what it is to be a marketing leader in this particular arena. Like, can we talk, because you brought up turnover, which I think is interesting. And I was talking about this with other colleagues, like during COVID, especially, like it was the mass resignation where everyone's like, I'm out, like, peace. Like, I don't want to do this. I'm leaving. And then people realized they weren't getting severance and they're like, well, hold on a minute, let me just quiet quit. And then I can pull off some severance on the way out the door. And now it's mass layoffs. And so it's really interesting to see how this pendulum has swung, I think, for high caliber employees and staff and team members. I mean, there's obviously a level of uneasiness when that happens, whether it's you that's being cut or 20% of your team is being cut, but the same expectations are on your shoulders. How has that changed your leadership? How has that changed, or how has that forced you to level up in your leadership in these really dramatic shifts in the marketplace that affects you and or your team?
Yeah, I think it really comes down to a couple of things. I think as a leader, you have to be continually investing in your team, especially when we all went remote and digital with COVID. I think, some teams lost touch with each other. It's really hard over Zoom to create the same connection as we had when we were in the office, but there's so many ways you can do it. And so it's about making that investment in your team, making sure there's engagement and a connection to the business, to each other. So I think, leaders, companies that didn't really take that seriously, I think they suffered a lot from, both the mass resignations and the quiet quitting. Now, on the other side, where now everybody's laying off, I think, to me, and I kind of told my team this as all these resignations were starting and we were trying to hire people, and, people were asking for ridiculous amounts of money because the market was supporting that. And I told my team, I said, hey, look, it's going to balance out. What I know about marketing and budgets is that budgets are not unlimited. So me, as a marketer, I have so much money I can invest in salaries. And if I have to pay 30, 50%, maybe double what I thought I was going to pay, I'm going to be expecting double the output. And if I'm not getting that, that's when you're the last one in, you're going to be the first one out. Like, you came in with these pretty big requests. I'm expecting that level of outcome, right? Or output. And if you can't bring that to the table, then you're going to be out quickly. And that's where I was trying to coach my teams. Like, man, there's going to be these market shifts, but be careful. You're going to put yourself in a risky position if the market changes back. And here we are, right? We're having to adjust. Why? Because we need to be efficient and grow. I mean, come on. I think the market got a little crazy for a little bit, but now it's adjusting like they do. And I think as marketers, as business people, we need to be mindful of that.
Well, it was like the housing market where people were like buying homes, not like they didn't even walk through the door and they were just buying it like sight unseen for like an obscene amount of money. You're like, what is happening? That's interesting. That's really, really interesting because it's true. I remember when I graduated, one of my professors said his biggest tip was like, always get paid just a little bit less than you're worth. And I was like, what? Because I think all of us think like, sports athletes, like, I want the biggest contract. I want to break records. I'm the, highest paid, sports athlete in the world, but that doesn't always translate. Because like you said, man, the expectations on your performance, the more I pay, the more my expectations are going to go up. And so it was a very wise professor that told me, always get paid less, a little bit more, less than what you're worth. And you always be a good deal to the company. And I just thought that was a really wise advice when I was 20 years old that I didn't fully appreciate until like I do today. Can we talk about your team? And we don't talk about specific individuals, but I was just having a conversation, actually 2 conversations just this week, and it's Tuesday, where CEOs are kind of dropping into my Voxer, this walkie-talkie app that I use, and like they're kind of like lamenting. They're stressed, or they're venting, I should say, about marketers or team members that they're paying quite a bit for, and they're not happy with the output. And so the question becomes, when do you call it? When do you call it that it's just not the right fit? Because I think they're trying to exhibit extreme ownership. Like maybe it's a shortcoming on me. Maybe I didn't onboard correctly. Like maybe I'm being unrealistic. Maybe I'm being a complete tyrant. And so like, I appreciate the self-awareness to say, what was my part in this, if there is a part in this. But I'm curious for you, in Monica's philosophy, like, you've heard the whole thing, like, right? Like hire slow, fire fast. But I'm just curious your personal perspective and philosophy on like when somebody's going to go the distance and when you call it.
I think it's going to depend on, where you are at in your company as well. It factors in. So I believe in investing in people, and I've always believed that. And, so when you think about it that way, it's like, oh, somebody's struggling. Okay, I need to help them. They're not maybe aware, or they don't know how to do it. So in those cases, when you have the opportunity, when you have the capacity to dive in and bring somebody up, you should, right? Because I think my best employees are the ones that I've coached up and have stayed with a business a long time. And I try to do that in every opportunity. I always keep my one-on-ones with my team members. I'm very blunt about how things are going. I do not believe that the first time you should be hearing that your performance is lacking is in an annual review. And I tell my team this, like, if I'm saying something that you've never heard before, tell me, because that's bad on me. My management was bad, right? These should be conversations we've been having. So I don't like things to be a surprise, because I will tell you first and I will give you time to rectify the situation. But if you can't, then you, as a leader, you have to take action. And I use this phrase a lot. It's like there's the difference between people that are willing versus able. Sometimes people are very willing. They want to do it. They just don't have the skill set or the experience. And it's going to take you a very long time to get them there. In a fast growing business where you got to go, you got to run, you need an athlete that can drop in and do it without you hovering. Like, I have to make that decision quick.
Yeah.
If I'm in a position where, okay, like, I have some time, I have capacity, I'm gonna pull this person up, I will do it. But where I'm finding myself a lot now is, I've got some team members, we're in a growth stage, and it's when our company is going from one level to another level. So although your title is the same, your position's actually quite different. The expectations have risen, and you need to step up to the plate. You got to move, right? And I'm seeing some team members struggle.
Yeah.
I've given them feedback. I've given them some space to correct it. And I'm seeing there are willing and not able people, and I'm having to make those hard decisions. So it does happen. I think you need to know what situation you're in, and then, handle it appropriately.
Yeah. I love that. The willing versus able. Okay. Here's where I think I would love to end this, because I could talk to you for hours, but I know I won't keep you for hours. So I'll do this. I'll end this fabulous podcast with a scenario, a hypothetical. If you had a fellow CMO, so a peer, an equal in a different business, in a different environment than you, that came to you in confidence and said, I'm struggling. I'm quite frankly, I think I'm like not, I'm just maybe get out of the game, get out of the marketing game. Like, this is just impossible. I guess I'm curious what advice you would give that person, because we're seeing so many, I think, really great marketers, especially marketing leaders, kind of self-eject. And it makes me sad. I understand it, but it makes me sad. And so I'm curious what you would share, what counsel you give them.
I've actually had these conversations as well, in my network. And I first try to understand why, like, what is causing them to feel like that? Because it could be so many different things, right? We have so many things flying at us at all times. And so it's really understanding, what has happened, and are you in a position to succeed or not, right? Because sometimes, and I found myself here many a times, Veronica, where I'm just like, F it, like, I'm done. And what I see about myself is like, if when that happens, I need to shut my mouth. I need to take a step back, and I need to, like, separate from whatever I'm doing and just give myself some time. Go do yoga, go walk the dog.
Yeah.
Like, I need a little bit of space to clear my mind. And in clarity, if I'm still feeling the same way, then something's wrong. But I know I'm an emotional person. So, like, I just know that about myself. So when I hear other CMOs say this, it's like, okay, so tell me a little bit about what's happening. Like, unpack it for me. Why do you feel like that? Sometimes it's an impossible position they're in. Maybe they took a job where they're not set up for success. The CEO or whoever they're working with doesn't believe in marketing, and they've tried all the things. At that point, I'll talk them through it. But really, my goal is, can you succeed here or not? If you can succeed here, like, really think about it, right? Because look at all the positives. But if you're not in a position to succeed, it's in an impossible position. Marketers find ourselves there all the time. Then I would say hit the eject, but think about how you're going to exit. do that professionally, all of those things. And there are times where you just need to hit the eject button.
Yeah, no, it's true. And that discernment, I recently did a presentation on my messy career journey. And it's not even messy. It's just like, the journey, the roller coaster that is being a professional. And there's been many chapter changes. And I was trying to like discern, like, what was it? Was there a guiding compass, a constellation, so to speak, that helped me have confidence behind making the call for myself? Making the call for another person tends to be a lot easier for me, but making the call for myself as an emotional being who like literally argues with herself like in my mind, because I can play both parts, logic versus emotion. So making the call for myself, it can be one of the hardest positions to be in. And you're right. And I do think that marketers are oftentimes put in what seems to be an impossible situation. And so having mentors, having a network, having colleagues and friends that you can reach out to that can help you feel like impossible can be possible means everything and then some. So I just want to thank you, Monica, for sharing your story. I want to thank you for being radically honest. I want to thank you for putting yourself out there. I know that, you appearing on podcasts is not the norm. And so I just really appreciate you letting me pick your brain to the benefit of those that are listening to this podcast.
Yeah, I appreciate it. This was really fun, Veronica. Thank you.
You're welcome. Okay, so we'll place all of your awesome links and people can connect with you further and learn more about your awesomeness, your legendary awesomeness through LinkedIn and whatnot down in the show notes. And so until next time, Rainmaker family. Thank you for joining us on today's Rainmaker podcast. Marketers help other marketers. So if there's a marketer in your life who could really use a new perspective in a way that helps them advance their career, please pass this episode forward, share, leave us a review. Everything helps as we embark on helping as many marketers elevate themselves inside and out. You can always visit veronicarami.com for today's show notes, additional links to some free resources and tools for you to help you advance your career. You can always connect with us on social media at @ViaRami if you want more behind the scenes or a way for us to connect personally. Until next time, my friends, make it rain.